Her species dies after first mating, but the human refused to let her go. The starboard thruster exploded in a shower of sparks that painted the cockpit red. "Structural integrity at 40%, Tavira called out, her fingers dancing across the navigation console, even as the ship bucked hard enough to slam Jake against his restraints. "I can feel the structural integrity, thanks," Jake said through gritted teeth, fighting the control yoke as the freighter tumbled into the planet's gravity well. Debris from the destroyed convoy had shredded their hull like tissue paper. Tavira's ears flattened against her copper hair as another alarm shrieked to life. "Engine core temperature critical. We have maybe 2 minutes before we become a very expensive firework. Yeah, I'm aware." Jake killed power to the damaged thruster and rerouted everything to the port side. The ship's spin slowed, but now they were dropping like a stone toward the planet below. Greens and blues swirled beneath clouds that looked deceptively peaceful. "Tell me you're getting that landing trajectory plotted," Jake said. Tavira's tail lashed behind her seat. Plotting a controlled descent with one thruster and no landing thrusters is somewhat challenging. "So that's a no. That's a give me 30 seconds and stop distracting me." Jake grinned despite everything. 6 months she'd been his co-pilot, and she still hadn't learned that panic and sarcasm were his primary coping mechanisms. He watched her work, the way her amber eyes tracked across multiple readouts simultaneously, her fingers moving with predatory precision. "There," she said, "continental interior near those mountain ranges. There's a valley that should—" The remaining thruster coughed, sputtered, and died. "Should what?" Jake asked. "Should have given us a chance." Now they were really falling. Jake pulled up the manual flight surfaces and prayed to any god listening that they'd hold together. The ship screamed as it hit the upper atmosphere, hull plating glowing orange with friction heat. "Angle us belly down," Tavira said, her voice steady. "Let the cargo bay take the heat. There goes our payload. There goes our lives if you don't." Jake rolled the ship, feeling every groaning protest of stressed metal. Sweat ran down his spine. Tavira remained perfectly still except for her ears, which swiveled with each new sound of structural damage. The clouds swallowed them, rain hammered the viewports. Then they broke through and Jake saw their landing zone, a valley carved between mountains, covered in strange vegetation in purples and deep reds. "Brace," he said. Tavira's tail wrapped around her seat support. Jake pulled up hard, using every trick he'd learned in 8 years of flying questionable cargo through questionable space. The ship skipped once off a ridge, tearing away more hull plating. Then they were down, plowing through alien trees, carving a trench through purple moss and red dirt. The viewports spiderwebbed with cracks. Then stillness, broken only by the tick of cooling metal and the drum of rain on the hull. "You alive over there?" Tavira's ears twitched upright. Surprisingly, yes. She unstrapped and moved to assess damage. The cargo bay was a loss. Half their hull had peeled away during entry, but the main systems compartment looked intact. "Communications array is slag," Tavira reported. "Engine core is cracked but stable. If we can find replacement parts, we might get airborne again." "Might?" "The solar charging cells are intact. Given enough time and materials, yes." "How much time?" "Weeks, maybe a month." Jake moved to the supply lockers. Emergency rations, medical supplies, basic tools, and his personal kit with whiskey, coffee, and the portable medical scanner he'd picked up on Proxima Station. "Could be worse," he said. "We've got supplies, shelter, and you're the best navigator I've ever worked with." Tavira's tail hung low. "Jake, this planet is quarantined for a reason. Dangerous fauna, unstable weather, and ruins from a dead civilization the Council deemed too hazardous for study." "Also, mentions rumors of ancient medical facilities," Jake said. "I read the same warnings you did." "Those are spacer legends." "Everything's a legend until someone proves it true." Tavira hadn't moved, standing in the ruined cargo bay with rain misting through the torn hull. Her ears were flat again, but this time it wasn't stress. Sadness. "Hey," he said, touching her shoulder. She flinched just slightly, then relaxed. "We've gotten out of worse." "Have we?" "Okay, no, but we will this time too. They set up camp inside the ship that first night, using emergency shelter fabric to seal the hull breaches. Jake got a fire going in a portable heating unit. They ate ration bars by LED lamplight. Outside, alien sounds filtered through the darkness. Tavira sat across the fire from him, her tail curled around her legs. The light caught the copper in her fur, turned her eyes into molten gold. She'd been quiet since landing, which wasn't like her. "Talk to me," Jake said. "What's really wrong?" Her ears swiveled toward him, then away. "I should have told you before, weeks ago, but I convinced myself it didn't matter." Cold settled into Jake's stomach. "Told me what?" Tavira met his eyes, and in them he saw fear for the first time since he'd known her. "My species doesn't die from mating. That's a misconception. We die from bonding, from forming deep emotional attachments. It's biological. When we truly bond with someone, fall in love, our bodies interpret it as a signal. Cells begin a cascade process. System failures follow within days or weeks." Jake stared at her. "That's why your people are so solitary, why you never mention family." "We can't afford attachments. Casual relationships, professional arrangements, those are safe, but genuine emotional connection is a death sentence. There must be treatments. None that work. Once the cascade begins, it's inevitable." Jake stood, paced, then crouched in front of her. "Why are you telling me this now?" Tavira's tail twitched. "Because I've been experiencing the early symptoms for 3 weeks now. Elevated heart rate when you're near. Heightened sensory focus on you specifically. The instinctive draw to maintain proximity. I thought if I recognized it early enough, I could suppress it, maintain professional distance until the contract ended." 3 weeks, Jake repeated, his voice hollow. "I'm sorry. I should have requested a transfer immediately, but Her composure cracked. "I didn't want to leave." Rain drummed on the hull. Jake reached out and took her hand, feeling the tremor in her fingers. "How long do we have?" 10 days, maybe 15 if I'm lucky. The symptoms will progress: weakness, pain, organ failure. At the end, the cellular breakdown becomes catastrophic." "No." Tavira's ears lifted slightly. "No? I've never been good at accepting the inevitable," Jake said, squeezing her hand. "And I'll be damned if I start now." Morning came with pale light filtering through the torn hull plating. Jake woke to find Tavira already awake, sitting near the sealed entrance with her knees drawn up, tail wrapped around her legs, staring at nothing. He'd spent half the night researching her species on the ship's limited database, finding frustratingly little. Nothing about the biological mechanism she'd described. Nothing about a cure. "Coffee," he offered, holding up 2 thermal packs. Tavira's ears perked slightly. "You're wasting supplies on luxuries. If I'm going to save your life on an abandoned planet, I'm doing it caffeinated." She accepted the pack, and their fingers brushed. Her breath caught, pupils dilating, tail going rigid. She pulled back like he'd burned her. "Sorry," she said. "Don't." Outside, the alien world was waking. Sounds filtered through. Chirps and calls that weren't quite birdsong, rustling that might have been wind or something moving through the undergrowth. "We need to assess the ship properly," Jake said. "Full inventory, damage report, repair timeline." "And then?" "Then we look for that medical facility you think doesn't exist." Tavira's tail flicked. "Jake, even if the legends are true, what makes you think it would have anything relevant to my biology? We're talking about technology from a species that died out thousands of years ago. Advanced enough that the Galactic Council quarantined an entire planet rather than let anyone study it. That's not nothing." The ship assessment took most of the morning. The damage was worse in daylight. The entire cargo section gone, the engine core fractured. The solar charging array worked, at least. 3 weeks minimum, Tavira said, running calculations. That's if everything goes perfectly. "You don't have 3 weeks." "No." Jake wiped grease off his hands. "Then we search for the facility. Ship repairs can wait." "That's not practical." "I don't care about practical. I care about keeping you alive." Tavira's ears flattened, but he saw warmth in her expression. "Why?" she asked softly. "We've only known each other 6 months. Why does this matter so much to you?" Jake wanted to deflect with humor like always, but standing in the wreckage of their ship looking at her in the morning light, he couldn't. Because somewhere between the third cargo run and last month's navigation crisis, you became more than just my co-pilot. Because you laugh at my terrible jokes and call me out when I'm being an idiot. Because the thought of losing you makes me want to put my fist through a bulkhead. Tavira stood slowly, closing the distance between them. Her hand came up to his chest, resting over his heart. "That's the problem," she whispered. "Those feelings, they're killing me." "Then we fix it. You can't fix biology with determination." They packed supplies and headed northeast toward the nearest ruins. The landscape was simultaneously beautiful and unsettling, vegetation in deep purples and burgundies, pale greenish-blue sky, air smelling of minerals and something sweet. Tavira moved ahead, her ears swiveling constantly. Once, she held up a hand and they froze while something large and scaled moved through the undergrowth. "Still think this is a good idea?" Tavira asked. "I think it's the only idea we've got." They walked for hours. Jake noticed Tavira showing strain around midday, breathing slightly labored, leaning more heavily on her walking stick. When they stopped for water, her hand trembled lifting the canteen. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Fine." "Tavira." She sighed. "Tired, more than I should be. The cascade affects energy production at the cellular level." Jake pulled out the medical scanner. The readout showed elevated stress hormones, slight cardiac arrhythmia, and metabolic irregularities. Nothing immediately dangerous, but clear evidence of decline. They rested briefly. Tavira studied the terrain ahead with binoculars, then stiffened. "There," she said, handing them over. 2 kilometers. Those aren't natural formations." Jake looked and felt his heart spike. Ancient structures rose from the jungle, geometric shapes, metal and stone, that had weathered millennia but still stood. "I'll be damned." They pushed on. The ruins were massive, buildings 3 times human height, corridors wide enough to drive through. They searched methodically, finding mostly empty husks stripped of anything useful. The sun was setting when Tavira called out from deeper in the complex. "Jake here?" He found her standing before a sealed door, different from the others. This one had power, a faint glow emanating from panels beside the entrance. The metal was pristine. "Active systems," Jake said. "After all this time?" He pressed what looked like an access button. The door hummed and slid open, revealing a corridor that stretched into darkness. Lights flickered on automatically as they entered. "This is preserved," Tavira said, "maintained, not just ruins, but a functioning facility." They moved deeper, passing through multiple chambers. The corridor opened into a large room filled with equipment, machines with organic curves, interfaces pulsing with gentle light, and in the center, medical chambers. Vertical cylinders of transparent material, each big enough to hold a person. "Medical facility," Jake breathed. "You were wrong about the legends." Tavira approached the nearest console. Her fingers hovered over the interface, and the symbols shifted, reorganizing. "It's adaptive," she said. "The system is reading my neural patterns and adjusting." She stopped, her ears flattening as the console displayed more information. What is it?" Tavira turned to him, and in her eyes he saw something that made his blood run cold. "This isn't a medical facility, Jake. It's a weapons development laboratory. These chambers aren't for healing, they're for genetic modification, for creating soldiers." Jake moved to her side. Documentation filled the screens, test subjects, genetic sequences, modification protocols, and there in the archived files, images of beings that looked distinctly like Tavira, dated thousands of years before her species should have existed. "No," Tavira whispered, "that's not possible." Jake pulled up more files. The documentation was clear. The species that built this facility had created others, engineered them for specific purposes. Soldiers, spies, assassins, each one designed with strengths and deliberate weaknesses. "The fatal bonding mechanism," Jake said, "it wasn't evolution, it was installed, a control method to prevent them from forming families, establishing dynasties, becoming independent." Tavira sank into the nearest seat, her tail limp. "My entire species, we're not natural, we're weapons someone made." Which means, Jake said, turning back to the console, there's an original template, a baseline before the modifications, and if they could install the bonding mechanism, we can remove it. He began pulling up files. The system responded, displaying sequences and modification protocols. Can you understand this? Tavira asked, her voice small. Jake stared at the readouts, his heart sinking. Some of it. The basic concepts aren't that different from human gene therapy, but the implementation, he shook his head. I'm a pilot who knows field medicine, not a geneticist. Then we're back where we started. No, we know what's wrong, we know it can be fixed, and we have the tools to do it. Tavira stood and took his hand. Jake, even if you figure out the interface, you could kill me. This equipment is designed for species that don't exist anymore. Then I won't make a wrong input. That's not how biology works. Jake pulled her closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. Do you trust me? He asked. Tavira's ears drooped, but she didn't pull away. That's not fair. Do you? She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. Yes, damn you, yes I do. Then give me time. Let me study this. Let me figure it out. He pressed his forehead to hers. I will not lose you. What if you can't? Then at least I'll have tried. They set up camp in quarters near the laboratory. Later, sitting against an oversized bed with Tavira leaning against his shoulder, Jake felt the weight of what they'd discovered. What are you thinking? Tavira asked. That whoever created you was terrified of what you might become without limitations. Tavira's tail curled around his leg. If you can't fix this, I want you to know these last few months with you have been worth it. Jake turned to face her, taking both her hands. It's not ending. I mean that. Jake. He kissed her, cutting off her protest. She stiffened for a heartbeat, then melted into him, her hands gripping his shirt. The kiss was desperate and fierce, carrying all the fear and hope neither of them could voice. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Tavira rested her forehead against his chest. That's not helping the cascade, she whispered. I don't care. You should. Tomorrow, Jake said, stroking her hair, careful of her ears. Tomorrow I'll start figuring out how to save you. Tonight, just let me hold you. Tavira burrowed closer, her tail wrapping around them both. Outside, the ancient facility kept its vigil, and somewhere in its databases lay the key to her survival. Jake just had to find it. Jake woke to find Tavira already at the laboratory console, her fingers moving across the interface with focused intensity. He'd slept maybe 3 hours. How long have you been up? He asked. Tavira's ears twitched, but she didn't look away from the screen. A while. I've been translating the database. The system's neural interface works better when I'm rested. Find anything useful? Too much. She pulled up a file showing anatomical diagrams. They were thorough. Every modification was tested, refined, optimized. Can you find your species' baseline template? Already did. She brought up a genetic sequence that split the screen. Original template versus modified version. The differences were highlighted in red. Hundreds of them. The bonding mechanism is here, Tavira said, pointing to a cluster of modifications. They tied emotional attachment to cellular death triggers. The stronger the bond, the faster the cascade. Can it be reversed? Theoretically. But Jake, she turned to face him, exhaustion in her eyes. The reversal would require rewriting significant portions of my genetic code, its fundamental biological restructuring. Jake pulled up a chair beside her. Walk me through it. For hours, Tavira taught him. She broke down the genetic modifications, explaining how they interlocked, how the bonding mechanism integrated with her species' enhanced systems. Jake absorbed what he could, finding parallels with human medicine. Human gene therapy targets specific cells, he said. We use viral vectors to deliver modified DNA. Is this similar? Conceptually, yes, but more sophisticated. These chambers can target every cell simultaneously. Complete restructuring in hours. That sounds too good to be true. It probably is. The mortality rate in the records is significant. 30% of subjects died during the process. Jake studied the chambers. What caused the deaths? Rejection, mostly. The body fighting the changes. Some subjects' immune systems attacked their own cells, others experienced cascading organ failures. So we need to do it slowly. Or precisely, Tavira said. If we can isolate just the bonding mechanism modifications and reverse only those, the risk decreases significantly. They spent the afternoon in intense study. Tavira accessed training protocols, running simulations. Jake memorized procedures, learning to read the biological readouts. You'd need to create a custom template, Tavira explained. The system has my current genetic profile. We'd need to generate a target profile that removes the bonding mechanism but preserves everything else. Can you do that? I can try, but I'm a navigator, not a geneticist, designing a stable genetic profile. She shook her head. The margin for error is microscopic. Jake reached out and took her hand, feeling the tremor. How are you feeling? Tell me the truth. Tavira's ears drooped. Worse. The tremors are more frequent. My heart rate is elevated even at rest, and I can feel my body failing, like everything is running just slightly wrong. Jake ran the medical scanner over her. The readout confirmed her condition had deteriorated since yesterday. How long? He asked quietly. Days, maybe a week if I'm lucky. Jake looked at the chambers. Then we move faster. Tonight we design the template. Tomorrow we run simulations. The day after. Jake, rushing this could kill me faster than the cascade. And waiting definitely will. They worked through the evening, Tavira creating the modified genetic template while Jake memorized operation protocols. The process was maddeningly complex. Every change created ripples through other systems. It's like untangling cables, Jake muttered. Pull one and three others tighten. Accurate metaphor. The species that designed this knew what they were doing. They didn't want it easily reversible. By midnight, Tavira had created something promising. A template that theoretically removed the fatal bonding mechanism while maintaining her species' other enhancements. We should test it, Jake said. The database has records of successful modifications, right? Run our template through the simulation using those subjects' biological parameters. Tavira's eyes widened. That's clever. She set up the simulation. The results came back mixed. 38 predicted survival, 12 predicted complications. Better than I feared, Tavira admitted. They ran more simulations, refining the template. By dawn, they had a version that predicted successful modification in 46 out of 50 cases. That's the best we're going to get, Tavira said, looking exhausted. Then we move forward. Jake, there's something else. The seriousness in her tone made him turn. Even if this works, it doesn't change what I am, what my species is. We're artificial. Our entire history is built on a lie. Jake moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking both her hands. So, humans used to think we were special creations of the gods. The truth about our origins didn't make us less real, less valuable. It just changed the story we told about ourselves. It's not the same. It's exactly the same. You're not defined by how you were made. You're defined by what you choose to do with your life. She looked down at their joined hands. And what if I choose to stay with you? Then you stay with me. We keep flying together. Your life would be easier without me. My life would be boring without you. A small smile touched her lips. You're impossible. Yeah, but you like that about me. She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and lingering. When do we start the procedure? Whenever you're ready. Tavira stood, swaying slightly before steadying herself. Now, before I lose my nerve, before the cascade progresses further. Jake's heart hammered as he helped her to the nearest chamber. You'll be unconscious, he explained. The chamber handles everything automatically. It should take 6 to 8 hours. Should. Will, Jake corrected firmly. Tavira touched the chamber, her reflection ghostly in the transparent surface. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Jake, she turned to face him. If something goes wrong, I need you to know that this was my choice, that you gave me hope when I had none. Jake pulled her into his arms. You're going to wake up, I'm going to make sure of it, and then we're going to have a lifetime together. Deal? She nodded. The preparation took an hour. Finally, she stepped into the chamber, support systems activating around her, interface pads attached to dozens of points. A neural crown descended onto her head. "It's reading my biology," she said, confirming the template parameters. Jake watched data flood across the screen. "Everything looks correct. On your word, I'll initialize the sequence." Tavira pressed her hand against the transparent wall. Jake matched it with his own. "I trust you," she said. "Jake, I love you. I should have said that before." The words hit him like a physical impact. "I love you too," he said, "which is why this is going to work." She smiled, vulnerable and terrified and brave. "Initialize the sequence." Jake pressed the button. The chamber hummed to life. Tavira gasped as sedation activated, her eyes fluttering closed. Support gel flooded the chamber. The neural crown pulsed with light. Jake monitored every stage. The nanoscale machines deployed, targeting specific genetic sequences, rewriting the code that had condemned her species. 40 minutes in, Tavira's vital signs spiked. Alarms shrieked. Her immune system was reacting. Jake's hands flew across the console, accessing immune suppression protocols. He initiated gradual suppression. The alarms quieted. Her vitals stabilized. Hours passed. Jake didn't leave the console, watching every fluctuation, every stage of restructuring. 4 hours, neural modifications complete. 5 hours, endocrine system restructuring. 6 hours, cellular repairs, her metabolic readings improved, stabilizing. 7 hours, final verification sweeps. The chamber chimed, modification complete. The chamber began draining, the neural crown retracted, and slowly Tavira's eyes opened. She looked disoriented, then her gaze found Jake, and she smiled. The chamber unsealed. Jake caught her as her legs buckled. She was shaking, but alive. "Did it work?" she whispered. Jake ran the medical scanner over her. "It worked. Your cellular metabolism is stable, no cascade markers. Tavira, you're cured." She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming. "I can feel it. Everything that was wrong, it's gone." Jake kissed her deep and fierce. When they broke apart, both were crying. "You did it," Tavira said. "You impossible, stubborn human." "We did it," Jake corrected. They sank to the floor together, Jake cradling Tavira as she recovered. "What now?" Tavira asked eventually. "Now we rest. Tomorrow we gather materials to repair the ship, and after that we go to your homeworld." Tavira stiffened. "Why?" "Because you're not the only one trapped by genetic manipulation. Your entire species deserves the choice we just made." She looked up at him with wonder. "You'd do that?" "For you, yes, and because it's right." Tavira's tail curled around his waist. "I really do love you, Jake Mercer." "Good," Jake said, pulling her closer. "Because now we have all the time in the world to figure out what that means." Tavira woke wrapped in Jake's arms, her body humming with energy. For the first time in weeks, she felt whole. No tremors, no fatigue. Jake stirred. "How are you feeling?" "Strong, better than I've ever felt." Jake ran the medical scanner over her again. "All readings normal, better than normal." "We should repair the ship." "About that," Jake set down the scanner. "This facility has technology that could change everything for your people. We take the database, the protocols, everything. Your species deserves the truth and the choice to be free." Tavira's tail swished. "That's dangerous knowledge. Then they reject it, but they should have the option." She studied him. He genuinely wanted to help simply because it was right. "All right." They spent the morning gathering materials. Jake created engine components. Tavira downloaded the database. By afternoon, they sealed the facility and trekked back to the ship. They worked into evening installing components. The ship came back to life. "Try the thrusters," Tavira called. Jake fired them. The ship shuddered but held. "We have flight capability." They rested one night, then launched at dawn. The ship rose through the purple canopy into space, jumping toward Tavira's homeworld. The journey took 3 weeks. They talked about everything, childhoods, dreams, plans. "After your homeworld," Jake said one evening, "what then?" Tavira's tail swished thoughtfully. "I want to help them, but stay permanently?" She shook her head. "Now that I can choose," she met his eyes, "I choose you, flying together, being part of something that isn't defined by limitations someone else imposed." Partners, then, in everything. Partners. They emerged at Tavira's home system. The planet hung ahead, deep reds and oranges with swirling clouds. I haven't been back in 5 years, Tavira said softly. You're not that person anymore. No, I'm not. They approached slowly, broadcasting identification. A delegation waited, 3 of Tavira's people. That's Elder Sarian, Tavira said. She oversees medical research. They disembarked. The elder approached. Tavira, you claim to have discovered something significant. Revolutionary. May we speak somewhere private? Follow me. They were led to a circular meeting room. Elder Sarian dismissed the other delegates. Tavira told everything, the crash, the discovery, the truth. She showed the genetic data, the protocols, the evidence. Finally, she submitted to a medical scan, proving she no longer carried the death sentence. Elder Sarian listened without interruption. If this is true, it changes everything. It's true, Jake said. I performed the procedure. The bonding mechanism was deliberately installed and it can be removed. By you, a human with no formal training? Using technology left by the species that created yours. Technology I'm offering to share. Elder Sarian's tail lashed. Why? What do you gain? I gain the woman I love living free from fear. I gain knowing an entire species isn't trapped by biological programming they never chose. The elder turned to Tavira. You trust him? With my life. Elder Sarian paced, movements tense. This will not be received easily. Our entire society is built around accepting our nature. Which is why it should be a choice, Jake said. Let individuals decide. Just freedom. Elder Sarian returned to her seat. The council will need to review this. We'll need the full database. It's all here, Tavira said, placing data cores on the table. The elder took them carefully. This will take weeks. Guest quarters will be prepared. She stood. I'll convene the council. Expect questions. Her expression softened. Regardless of what comes next, you have my gratitude. They were escorted to guest quarters. As the door sealed, Tavira collapsed onto the bed. That went better than I feared. She didn't throw us out. Tavira laughed. And now we wait. Jake sat beside her, taking her hand. However long it takes, we're in this together. Together, I like the sound of that. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings and examinations. Elder Sarian's team subjected Tavira to every test, confirming the bonding mechanism was truly gone. Researchers studied the database, cross-referencing it with their genetic records. Jake answered endless questions, walking them through every step. Some were skeptical, others fascinated. A few were openly hostile. But slowly the evidence became undeniable. 3 weeks after arrival, Elder Sarian summoned them to the council chambers, the room filled with representatives from across the planet. We have reviewed your evidence, Elder Sarian announced. The conclusion is unanimous. Everything you've claimed is accurate. A murmur ran through the chamber. The question is what we do with this knowledge. Some argue we should suppress it. Others believe we have a moral obligation to share the truth and offer the cure. She paused. I believe the latter. We cannot build a future on comfortable lies. Not everyone looked convinced, but no one spoke against her. The procedure will be made available, voluntary, heavily screened, with extensive counseling. We will not rush this, but we will not hide it either. She turned to Jake and Tavira. You have given us an extraordinary gift, freedom from fear, from isolation, from the certainty of loss. On behalf of my people, I thank you. The chamber erupted in discussion. Outside, Tavira leaned against Jake, her ears flat with exhaustion. We did it. You did it, Jake corrected. No, she turned to face him. You refused to accept what everyone called inevitable. You fought when fighting seemed pointless. You gave us all hope. Jake pulled her close. So what now? Stay here? Go back to flying cargo? Tavira's tail curled around his leg. I was thinking something different. Your species is good at this, at seeing problems everyone else has accepted and finding solutions. What if we did this professionally, found other species trapped by biology or technology and helped them break free? Jake smiled. Freelance miracle workers? Something like that. I like it. We'd need a better ship, though. Medical equipment, research databases, proper tools. A crew, eventually. Tavira laughed, the sound free and joyful. Getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Maybe, but we've got time now, all the time in the world. He kissed her, soft and lingering. First things first, Tavira said. Let's get off this planet before they change their minds about us. Running away already? Not running, moving forward, there's a difference. They returned to their quarters and began packing. Tomorrow they'd leave, taking with them the gratitude of an entire species and the knowledge that they'd changed history. But tonight, they simply held each other. Two people who'd crashed on a forgotten planet and found something neither had dared hope for. Not just survival, but a future built on choice rather than destiny. Outside, the crimson sun set over the city, and somewhere in the medical facilities, preparations were beginning for the first voluntary procedure that would free another of Tavira's people. The future was uncertain, full of challenges neither could predict, but they'd face it together, partners in everything, bound not by fatal biology but by choice and love, and the stubborn human refusal to accept that anything was truly inevitable. Jake pulled Tavira closer, ready for whatever comes next. She smiled against his chest. With you always. And in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms with infinity spread before them, they were exactly where they were meant to be. The new ship wasn't much to look at, a compact courier vessel with upgraded engines and enough cargo space for medical equipment. But it was theirs. Jake ran his hand along the hull plating. She's beautiful, Tavira said, her tail swishing with excitement. She's functional, Jake corrected, smiling, which is better when you're trying to help people across the galaxy. They'd spent the last month on Tavira's homeworld, consulting with medical teams preparing to offer the genetic modification procedure. Elder Sarian had insisted on funding their new venture, calling it an investment in the future. The first procedure is scheduled for tomorrow, Tavira said quietly. Kira volunteered. She wants to bond with her research partner. Jake remembered Kira, young, brilliant, desperately in love with someone she could never truly be with, until now. That's good. She'll have what you have now. Tavira leaned into him. What we have, there's a difference. They boarded the ship, running through pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. 6 months ago, they'd been strangers. Now they moved around each other with fluid synchronization. Navigation systems online, Tavira reported. Course plotted for the Andari system. We should arrive in 4 days. The Andari situation, Jake said, settling into the pilot's seat. You're sure about this one? As sure as I can be. The message was cryptic, but the details match our criteria. A species facing biological limitations they didn't choose, looking for help they can't find through conventional means. Jake pulled up the transmission they'd received. It had been vague, carefully worded, but the subtext was clear. Someone needed help, and they'd heard rumors of a human pilot and his vulpine partner who'd accomplished something unprecedented. Could be a trap, Jake said. Could be, Tavira agreed, but probably isn't. Jake initiated the launch sequence. The ship lifted smoothly, rising through the atmosphere. Below, the crimson and orange planet fell away. Ready? Always. Space folded around them as they jumped. The Andari system was bustling when they arrived. Jake navigated through traffic, while Tavira handled communications. Andari Control is directing us to a private landing facility, she reported. Restricted access, diplomatic clearances required. They were met by a single individual, tall, humanoid with skin that shifted colors subtly and eyes that held too much knowledge. I am Counselor Varen, the diplomat said, their voice carrying harmonics. Thank you for coming. Your discretion is appreciated. Discretion we can do, Jake said, but we need to know what we're dealing with. Varen's colors shifted toward deeper blues. Follow me. They were led through security checkpoints until finally entering a medical observation room. Through the transparent wall, Jake could see a dozen individuals in various states of distress. What are we looking at? Tavira asked. A genetic plague, Varen said quietly, engineered centuries ago as a weapon. It was supposed to target our enemies, but it mutated. Now it's dormant in 90% of our population, activating seemingly at random. Once active, it's progressive and fatal. Jake studied the patients. You've tried conventional treatments? Everything. Nothing stops it once it activates. The plague rewrites itself faster than we can counter it. Why contact us? Tavira asked. Varen's colors shifted to hopeful yellows. Because you solved a problem everyone else called unsolvable. You removed a genetic modification that was supposedly permanent. Our plague operates on similar principles. If you could access the original genetic template before the plague was introduced, you could rewrite the affected individuals back to baseline, Jake finished. Remove the plague code entirely. Theoretically, yes, but we don't have the technology. Jake and Tavira exchanged glances. This was bigger than they'd anticipated. We'd need samples, Tavira said. Genetic profiles of affected and unaffected individuals, historical records, and access to whatever medical facilities you have. All of that can be arranged, Varen said quickly. Cost is no object. We'll do what we can, Jake said, but I need to be clear, we're not miracle workers. We got lucky with the technology we found. This might be completely different. Lucky is more than we have now, Varen replied. They spent 3 days immersed in Andari genetics. Tavira worked with medical teams, mapping the plague's progression. Jake studied their modification technology, trying to adapt the ancient techniques. The plague was elegant in its horror, a genetic sequence that lay dormant until triggered, then cascaded through the genome, corrupting cellular processes. The triggers are the problem, Tavira said on the third night. We can't remove the plague code if we can't stop it from constantly rewriting itself. Jake studied the holographic display. What if we don't try to delete it? What if we overwrite it instead? Use the ancient technology to rewrite the affected sections so fast that the plague can't keep up. Tavira's ears perked up. A genetic flash flood, overwhelming the plague's replication. She pulled up calculations. It would require immense precision. Too slow and the plague adapts. Too fast and we damage healthy tissue. But possible? Possibly possible. We'd need to test it. They worked through the night, developing a modification protocol. It was aggressive, risky, and completely untested. But when they presented it to Varen the next morning, the counselor's colors shifted to determined reds. We have volunteers, terminal patients who have days at most. The first attempt failed. The patient survived, but the plague adapted too quickly. We're missing something, Jake said. Tavira was studying the genetics with intense focus. The plague isn't just rewriting genetic code, it's protecting itself with redundancy. Every sequence has backup copies. We delete one, the others activate and restore it. So we need to target all the copies simultaneously. Jake paced, what if we let the plague identify itself? Use its own replication against it. Trigger its defensive response, force it to activate all its backup copies at once, then hit everything simultaneously with the modification protocol. Tavira's eyes widened. That's insane. You'd be amplifying the plague's activity. For about 30 seconds before we wipe it all out. They refined the approach, developing a 2-stage protocol. The timing would be critical. This is going to require manual operation, Jake said. Someone has to monitor the plague's response and trigger the modification at the exact right moment. You, Tavira said firmly, you have the experience. They brought the plan to Varen. 5 terminal patients agreed to try. The first was a young Andari named Solis, whose colors had faded to dull grays. I'm ready, Solis said weakly. Jake helped him into the modification chamber. Tavira monitored the readouts. The medical bay was crowded with Andari doctors, all watching in tense silence. Initializing stage 1, Jake announced, triggering plague response in 3, 2, 1. He activated the genetic marker. On the monitors, the plague exploded into activity. Solis's vital signs spiked, alarms sounding. Counting copies, Tavira called out, 50, 100, 200. The count climbed, 300, 400. Solis's vital signs were deteriorating rapidly. 500 and holding, Tavira said. I think that's all of them. You think? Jake, we're out of time. His systems are failing. Jake activated stage 2. The modification protocol unleashed, targeting every marked plague sequence simultaneously. 30 seconds, the longest 30 seconds of Jake's life. Then the readouts changed, the plague markers began disappearing. Solis's vital signs stabilized, started improving. "It's working," Tavira breathed. "Jake, it's actually working." They watched for another hour. The baseline code held. Solis's colors began returning. When they finally brought him out of the chamber, he was weak but alive and plague-free. The medical bay erupted in celebration. Over the next week, they treated the remaining 4 volunteers. 3 succeeded completely, 1 partially succeeded. All 5 patients lived. "You've given us hope," Varen said as they prepared to depart. "The protocol can be replicated. You've saved thousands of lives." "You saved yourselves," Jake corrected. "We just provided the tools." Nevertheless, Varen's colors shifted to grateful golds. "You have the eternal thanks of the Andari people." As they lifted off, Tavira leaned back with a satisfied sigh. 2 species in 2 months. We're getting good at this. Getting good at flying by the seat of our pants and hoping we don't kill anyone. That too. Jake plotted their next course. "You know," Tavira said, watching stars streak past, "when I first met you, I thought you were reckless and overconfident." "I am reckless and overconfident." "Yes, but you're also brilliant and stubborn and absolutely refusing to accept limitations." She reached over and took his hand. "You taught me that impossible just means no one's tried the right approach yet." Jake squeezed her hand. "We make a good team. The best." They flew on through the darkness, 2 unlikely partners bound by choice and love. Behind them, 2 species were building futures they'd never imagined possible. Ahead, the galaxy waited with new challenges. Jake glanced at Tavira, catching her smile in the reflection of the viewport. She'd come so far from the guarded navigator who'd been slowly dying. "Next stop," she asked. "Wherever someone needs help they can't find anywhere else," Jake said. "That's what we do now." Miracle workers. Just stubborn humans and the people who love them. Tavira laughed, bright and free. Outside, the stars wheeled past, infinite and full of possibility. And somewhere out there, someone was facing an impossible problem, not knowing that help was already on its way. 2 unlikely heroes in a modest ship, carrying ancient knowledge and modern hope, proving every day that nothing was truly inevitable. Not death, not isolation, not any limitation that someone had decided was permanent. The future stretched before them, uncertain and beautiful and entirely their own. And they flew toward it together,